Hello friends, welcome back. I'm Buddy here at House of Props, and this week's build are these Legolas white knives from the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit trilogies. We got to see Orlando Bloom wield these through some iconic scenes when he wasn't using his bow. To keep the knives looking realistic, I decided to 3D print them. That way I could keep the blade thin like an actual metal blade would be, and I printed them with a 25% infill in order to keep them sturdy enough so they are less likely to snap. After my deep dive into image research, which accompanies all my builds, I needed to decide how to approach the inlay area on the blade. United Cutlery has gold set in the filigree, and this image they use of Legolas holding the knives has been photoshopped. You can tell because the knives are way larger in the image than they actually are in the film. But this image from Weta Workshop shows the blades are only etched. They don't have any gold inlay. So naturally, since this is from the company who produced the movie prop, I went with the non-inlay design. And to spice up the build a little, I've applied gold leaf to the knife grips. The whole build process is actually really easy. Then let me show you how, and let's get started. I designed them so each knife is made with only 3 pieces. This way there will only be one seam on each knife we will need to worry about. My initial prints had a couple of spots where the file was too thin for the printer to recognize and print, so there are a couple of gaps in mine I will need to fix. But don't worry, the files linked below have been fixed, so this won't happen to you. I just fixed mine by gluing a thin scrap piece into place, and when I'm finished you'll never even know. So let's start some cleanup. In order to get these knives to look like clean, polished steel, we need to remove any signs they've been printed with plastic. To start, I sand all the pieces with some 150 grit sandpaper. Usually I would start with some 120, but I ran out in the shop and didn't realize it, so I just ended up using what I had, which was the 150. But you could also use something like a 180 if you choose. You just need to start with a low number, and this step will remove the bulk of the print layer lines. After the 150, I switched to some 220. This finer grit will continue to remove the plastic and really begin to smooth off the surface. I'm focusing mainly on the flat surfaces and not really bothering to sand the filigree area because it's a little difficult to get to, but that's not a problem because in a few more steps those areas will get smooth as well, but in a different way. Next, I graduate up to some 400 grit. By working up and up to a finer grit, the print will become more smooth and the presence of layer lines will disappear. At this point, the blades could be assembled and the pieces attached by inserting a small dowel. I'm using an 1 5/8 piece of a toothpick, which will work just fine. To glue in place, I squeeze some CA glue into the hole and insert the dowel in as far as it goes. Then I add some glue to the next hole and on the flat surface where the 2 pieces will come in contact with each other. Then I take my time and carefully align the pieces so everything is just spot on and all the filigree lines up. While I align those, I would really appreciate it if you would click the subscribe button if you haven't already. It's completely free to you and will help my channel grow. Plus, if you click the notification bell, you can customize your notifications so you'll never miss a project release. Thank you. Once I'm happy with the alignment, I squeeze a drop of zip kicker onto the seam. This will cure the glue and I won't need to hold it in place until it dries. The blade is designed to slip into the handle like so, but I'm not going to attach that just yet. But for right now, we can continue the smoothing process. The next step is to hide the seams, and to do that I'm using this trusty glazing and spot putty from Bondo. I apply it thickly to the seam with a palette knife, and the reason I'm applying it thickly is the putty shrinks a little as it dries, and if it's not thick enough it might split open or sink into the seam. But if you really press it into the seam and keep it thick, you should be fine. When the tips of the blades were printing, there was a slight wobble happening because of their height. Nothing major, it's just offset a couple of layers, so I'm just applying a layer of the putty to make sure any imperfections are filled in. Once it's all cured, I level the putty off with the 220 grit sandpaper, and by having these spots pre-sanded, it'll help us later on. Next, I take some of the spot putty and thin it with some acetone in a 1:1 ratio. This I then airbrush onto the pieces with an old airbrush. What this will do is help fill in any unevenness in layer lines that the sandpaper wasn't able to smooth. You could also apply this with a brush, but it won't be as even as with an airbrush of course, but really that's no big deal as you'll see in a little bit. I just prefer the airbrush on intricate pieces like this because you can get even coverage without fear of losing any of the filigree details. After the putty has sufficiently dried, it can be smoothed with the 400 grit sandpaper. This step does make quite a mess, so just be sure you are working in an area free of pets and children, a place you don't mind making a mess in, and you are wearing clothes you don't mind getting dirty. This and the next couple of steps are what really gives us the smooth surface to achieve a realistic blade finish. Okay, all the pieces are sanded and feel really smooth to the touch, but let's take it even further. To do that, I spray mine with some 2-in-1 filler and sandable primer. I apply 3 even coats and wait 30 minutes between each layer before applying the next. This step will not only help with smoothing the surface, but it also provides a great primer layer for us to then paint on. After the primer layer has dried, the pieces may look like they have a little bit of texture. This is just the nature of the spray. It's meant to be sanded, so that's what I do with the 400 grit. I know it seems like a lot of sanding, but it is a technique that always pays off and is affordable to practically everyone. None of these materials I've shown you are over $10, but if you try to level with fancy leveling glazes or resins, those items can be a little costly. Plus, they require a little sanding in the end anyway. But for me, I stick to this tried and true method that has never failed me. Alright, I want to make the pieces so smooth they have their own shine before they even get painted, so at this point I wet sand them. First, I apply some water to the area, and then use some 1000 grit sandpaper to polish up the surface. You can see how smooth the pieces finally look and how all the sanding has paid off, so now we can begin to paint. As a base, I'm using some glossy black spray paint. I'll use this on the blades and on either end of the handles, but leave the grip area uncovered. A glossy black like this works really well as a base for metallics. It causes the metallics to really shine and pop than if we painted the metallic directly onto the gray primer. You can see how smooth and shiny the pieces are after only 3 light coats of the glossy black. This black base will also show up any imperfections that may have been missed, and they can be addressed before applying the metallic silver, but luckily I don't have to do that right now. When using metallic spray paint, you don't want to apply it too heavy too fast or it'll run. Instead, build up coverage by lightly dusting the surface. I'm going to spray the blades with the silver, but not the ends of the handles that I will apply gold leaf to. I'll leave those black. This is my blade after 3 dustings with the silver, and we're looking pretty good, but I think I'll give it one more for good measure. While the blades dry, I baste the grips on the handles with a mixture of white and burnt umber acrylics. Then after that dried, I brush on a mixture of white with cadmium yellow. Usually I try to avoid brush marks or using brushes that leave prominent marks, but in this case it helps. By using the hard bristle brush and keeping my application direction lengthwise, the marks left behind work to create a fine wood grain pattern, so the darker base shows through, slightly giving us a very subtle wood effect. After the paint is dry, I trace the vine filigree on both sides of each handle with a pencil. Then using this antique gold paint from Craftsmart and a small round brush, I delicately paint in the details. When that's dry, I lightly spray the handles with a matte clear coat. In my case, I'm using some Camar varnish I had in the shop, but you can use any matte clear coat you'd like. By spraying these, it'll seal the paint and help protect it from wear while being held. With the clear coat dry, it was time to apply the gold leaf. It's not as daunting as it sounds. In fact, it's really easy to do, and all you need is some gold leaf sheets and some metal leaf adhesive, also known as sizing. And both of these are available at most craft supply stores. First, you want to apply an even layer of the sizing medium to the area you want to cover with leaf. This particular sizing begins by looking white, and when it turns clear, it is ready to reseed the leaf. But you need to wait until it's clear. Don't let the gold anywhere near the sizing when it's white. It'll only take a few minutes for the sizing to turn clear and get very sticky to the touch. Then, using a piece of wax paper so the gold won't stick to my fingers, I lift a sheet of leaf onto the prepared surface, and very lightly with my fingertip, I press the leaf down to make sure it is securely attached. Then using a very soft mop brush, I lightly rub the surface to again make sure the leaf is entirely attached to the sizing. Then, again using the brush, I vigorously brush away the excess leaf, leaving behind a perfectly covered end on the handle. The leaf I brush away is still usable, so I won't dispose of that, and I continue by applying the leaf to the end where the blade inserts and the other handle as well. By leaving the blades detached, it made leaf application a lot easier, plus there wasn't any need to tape off any areas when painting, but now it's time to attach the blades, and first I squeeze some E6000 into the opening. Then I add some CA glue around the top edge of the hole. Then I align the blade. The CA glue will cure quickly, holding the pieces together, and the E6000 will provide a more flexible bond and is less likely to crack open like CA glue potentially can. Once the blade is where I like it, I add a little CA glue into the ends like so, and then set the CA glue as the zip kicker. That's one down and one to go. And then there you are, two 3D printed Legolas white knives. You can see how all the attention to sanding and polishing preserved all the detail on the blades, and then when painted, how shiny and metallic they look, just like a well-polished stainless steel blade. And you can't see any print lines, and no one will ever guess it was printed in multiple pieces unless they happen to watch this video. I didn't want to just paint the gold details, and I hope I was able to show you just how easy it is to apply gold leaf to objects. The same technique can be used on various props, not just 3D prints, and it's an easy way to elevate your builds. I hope you enjoyed this project. If you have any questions about any of the materials or techniques I've used, feel free to ask. I'm only too happy to answer them. And if you want to make these knives, I've posted a link to them below. Again, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, share it with all your friends and family, subscribe if you haven't, and I'll catch you on the next one. Have a great day. And remember, if you are building any of my builds or using any of my templates, feel free and tag me at House of Props on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, because I would really like to see your fantastic work. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.